The private jet shimmered on the tarmac, its silver hull catching the afternoon sun like a promise of extravagance. Inside, plush leather seats and gold-trimmed walls whispered wealth, an exclusive haven for the elite. Passengers glided aboard, their designer luggage clicking behind them, sipping champagne as soft jazz hummed through the cabin. Among them stepped Aisha Carter, a black woman in her late 30s, her tailored emerald coat hugging her frame with quiet grace. Her presence was a subtle ripple, calm, composed, her dark eyes scanning the opulence without a flicker of awe. She didn't chase attention, it found her anyway. At the entrance stood Karen Holt, the lead flight attendant, her uniform crisp as a blade, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. In her early 40s, Karen ruled the cabin with a hawk's gaze, her sharp features tightening as she assessed each passenger. Her smile bloomed warm for a silver-haired couple clutching luxury bags. But when Aisha approached, it withered. "Welcome aboard," Karen said. Her voice clipped, her eyes narrowing as if Aisha's elegance offended her. Aisha nodded, unfazed, her steps measured as she moved to her seat near the front. The cabin buzzed with privilege, passengers scrolling tablets, clinking glasses, but an undercurrent stirred. Karen's posture stiffened, her fingers twitching against her clipboard. Something about Aisha gnawed at her, a puzzle she couldn't place. Aisha settled in, her calm a stark contrast to Karen's coiled energy. Outside, the jet's engines purred to life, promising a journey of luxury. Inside, a storm brewed, unseen but electric, ready to crack the polished veneer wide open. One woman's quiet strength was about to collide with another's brittle control, and the fallout would be unforgettable. The jet climbed into the sky, engines humming a steady rhythm as sunlight streamed through the oval windows. Passengers reclined in their seats, the clink of crystal glasses punctuating the air. Aisha Carter sat near the front, her emerald coat folded neatly beside her, her hands resting on a sleek leather binder. She gazed out at the clouds, her face serene, a portrait of unshakable calm. Across the aisle, a tech mogul in a crisp suit tapped his tablet, stealing glances her way. Behind her, an heiress with a cascade of auburn curls whispered to her companion, her diamond earrings glinting. "She's got style," the heiress murmured, intrigued. Karen Holt prowled the cabin, her clipboard clutched like a shield. Her eyes darted from passenger to passenger, lingering on Aisha with a flicker of disdain. Something about Aisha's quiet poise, the way she didn't fawn or flaunt, pricked at Karen's nerves. She approached, her heels clicking sharply on the carpet. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her tone polite but edged with ice. "I need to see your boarding pass. This section's reserved for our top-tier guests." Aisha turned her head slowly, meeting Karen's gaze. "I'm in the right place," she replied, her voice smooth as velvet, steady as stone. She didn't reach for a pass, didn't flinch. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers tightening on the clipboard. "I don't think so," she snapped, her smile a brittle mask. "This isn't your spot. Move to the back, please." The cabin hushed. The tech mogul looked up, frowning. The heiress leaned forward, her eyes wide with curiosity. Aisha tilted her head slightly, her expression unchanged. "Check your list," she said simply, her words carrying a quiet weight. Karen's eyebrows shot up, her irritation flaring. "I don't need to check anything," she retorted, her voice rising. "I know who belongs here. You don't." A murmur rippled through the seats. An older couple near the galley, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, glanced over. Mrs. Henderson clutched a velvet purse, her silver hair catching the light, while Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses, peering at the scene. Karen flashed them a warm smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson." "Everything all right?" she cooed, her tone syrupy. Mrs. Henderson nodded absently, but Aisha caught the shift Karen's warmth for them, her chill for her. Karen turned back, crossing her arms. "If you don't move, I'll call security," she warned, loud enough for all to hear. Her words dripped with condescension, a dare wrapped in authority. The heiress gasped softly, whispering, "She wouldn't dare." The tech mogul set his tablet down, his jaw tightening. Aisha leaned back slightly, her calm unshaken. "Call who you need," she said, her voice low, resonant. "I'm staying." The air thickened, crackling with tension. Karen's face flushed, her control slipping. She spun to a junior attendant hovering nearby. Lila, a nervous young woman with wide eyes. "Lila, get her out of here," Karen barked. Lila hesitated, glancing at Aisha, then at the passenger list clipped to the wall. "Maybe we should," she began, but Karen cut her off. "Now, Lila," she snapped, her glare fierce. Lila stepped forward, her hands trembling. "Ma'am, please," she whispered, almost pleading. Aisha's gaze softened briefly at Lila, then hardened as it returned to Karen. "You're making a choice," she said quietly, her words a warning, cloaked in calm. Karen scoffed, waving a hand. "I know exactly what I'm doing. Get up!" The tech mogul shifted, his voice cutting through. "She's not the problem here," he said, calm but firm. Karen whirled on him. "Stay out of this, sir," she hissed, her composure fraying. Passengers exchanged looks, some uneasy, some riveted. The heiress clutched her companion's arm, whispering, "This is getting wild." Mr. Henderson muttered, "She's digging her own grave." Karen ignored them, her focus locked on Aisha. "You're not supposed to be here," she said again, her voice trembling with impatience. "Move, or I'll make you." Aisha picked up her phone, her movements deliberate, typing something swift and precise. She set it down, her eyes meeting Karen's. "You'll see your mistake soon," she said, her tone a quiet thunder. Karen smirked, undeterred. "You don't scare me," she shot back, gesturing at Lila. "Do it." Lila froze, caught between duty and doubt. The cabin held its breath, the hum of the engines underscoring the standoff. Aisha's calm was a wall, unyielding, while Karen's fury built like a storm about to break. The heiress leaned closer to her friend. "She's got something up her sleeve," she murmured, enthralled. The tech mogul nodded silently, sensing the shift. Karen stepped closer, her voice sharp as a blade. "Last chance. Back of the plane, now." Aisha didn't blink. "I've told you," she said, her words measured, soulful. "I'm not moving." The tension coiled tighter, a fuse burning down to its end. Karen's hand twitched, her control teetering on the edge. What came next would shatter the cabin's fragile peace, and no one, not even Karen, was ready for it. The cabin pulsed with tension, a live wire ready to spark. Karen Holt loomed over Aisha Carter, her face a mask of fury, her hands clenched at her sides. "You're done here," she hissed, her voice cutting through the hum of the jet's engines. "Move, or I'll drag you myself." Aisha sat still, her emerald coat draped beside her, her dark eyes locked on Karen's. "You shouldn't judge what you don't understand," she said, her tone steady, resonant, a quiet storm gathering strength. Karen's smirk twisted, her patience snapping. "I don't need to understand you," she spat. "I know your type, thinking you can sneak into places you don't belong." The words landed like a slap, sharp and deliberate. The heiress across the aisle gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's too far," she whispered to her companion. The tech mogul straightened, his voice low but firm. "Enough. You're out of line." Karen ignored them, her focus a laser on Aisha. "Get up!" she barked, her voice echoing through the cabin. Passengers flinched, eyes darting between the two women. Lila, the junior attendant, hovered nearby, her face pale, her fingers twisting together. Aisha leaned forward slightly, her calm unshaken. "Respect isn't a privilege you get to withhold," she said, her words slow, deliberate. "I've asked for it, you've refused." The air crackled, Karen's eyes narrowed, her breath quickening. "Respect?" she sneered, stepping closer. "You don't deserve mine. You're nothing here." The insult hung heavy, a challenge thrown down. Mr. Henderson muttered to his wife, "She's lost it." Mrs. Henderson nodded, her velvet purse trembling in her lap. The heiress clutched her companion's arm, whispering, "She's about to regret this." Aisha's gaze didn't waver. "You're wrong," she said softly, her voice a blade wrapped in silk. "And you'll see how wrong." Karen laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Threats won't save you," she snapped. "I'm in charge here." She reached for Aisha's arm, her fingers hovering, poised to grab. The tech mogul stood halfway, his voice sharp. "Don't touch her." Karen froze, her hand inches from Aisha. The cabin held its breath, the silence deafening. Then, in a flash, her temper erupted. She pulled back and swung, her open palm striking Aisha's cheek with a crack that split the air. Gasps erupted. Sharp, ragged, a chorus of shock. The heiress cried out, "Oh my God!" Lila's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. The tech mogul surged forward, stopped only by his seatbelt. "What the hell are you doing?" he roared. Aisha didn't flinch. The sting bloomed across her face, a red mark rising, but her posture remained regal, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She turned her head slowly, her eyes piercing Karen's. "You just crossed a line you can't uncross," she said, her voice low, soulful, carrying a weight that chilled the room. Karen faltered, her hand trembling mid-air, the echo of the slap still ringing. The heiress whispered, "She's not even mad. That's terrifying." The tech mogul glared at Karen, his fists clenched. "You're finished," he said, his tone ice-cold. Passengers shifted, some pulling out phones, discreetly recording the chaos. Lila stepped back, tears brimming, mouthing, "I'm sorry," to no one in particular. Karen's bravado flickered, her chest heaving. You provoked me," she stammered, her voice cracking. "You made me do that." Aisha straightened, her presence towering despite her seated position. "No," she said, her words clear, cutting. "You chose this. Your prejudice chose this." The cabin seemed to shrink around her, her calm a force that dwarfed Karen's unraveling fury. Karen's face flushed crimson, her hands balling into fists. "You think you're better than me?" she shouted, desperation creeping in. "You're nobody." Aisha's lips curved faintly, not a smile, but a shadow of one. "You don't know who I am," she said, her voice a quiet thunderclap. "But you will." The promise hung in the air, heavy, electric. Karen stepped back, her confidence splintering. "What's that supposed to mean?" she demanded, but her tone wavered, doubt seeping through. The heiress leaned forward, breathless. "She's got her now," she murmured. Lila glanced at the passenger list again, her hands shaking as she scanned the names. Her eyes widened and she froze, a realization dawning. She opened her mouth to speak, but Karen whirled on her. "Stay out of it, Lila," she snapped, her voice shrill. Lila shrank back, clutching the list, her silence screaming what Karen refused to hear. The tech mogul watched Aisha, a knowing glint in his eye. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath. Karen pointed at Aisha, her finger trembling. "You're off this plane," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "I'll have you thrown out." Aisha met her gaze, unblinking. "Try it," she said, her words soft but steel-edged. "You've already lost." The cabin pulsed with anticipation, every eye locked on the two women, one a volcano of fury, the other an ocean of calm, deep and unstoppable. The breaking point had arrived, and what came next would shatter everything Karen thought she controlled. The jet's engines droned on, a steady pulse beneath the chaos. Aisha Carter sat poised, the red mark on her cheek a stark contrast to her unwavering calm. Karen Holt stood frozen, her hand still trembling from the slap, her eyes darting as the weight of her actions sank in. The cabin buzzed with murmurs, shock, disbelief, and a growing unease. The heiress clutched her companion's arm, whispering, "She's done for." The tech mogul crossed his arms, his gaze hard on Karen. Aisha reached for her phone, her movements slow, deliberate. She typed a brief message, then set it down, her eyes lifting to Karen. "You should have listened," she said, her voice smooth, cutting through the tension like a blade. Karen's bravado crumbled, her breath hitching. What are you doing?" she stammered, her tone fraying. Aisha didn't answer, her silence a wall of power. Footsteps echoed from the front. The cockpit door swung open and the pilot emerged. Captain Daniels, a tall man with a stern jaw and pale, tense features. He strode toward them, his eyes flicking to Aisha, then Karen. "Step aside, Karen," he said, his voice firm, edged with discomfort. Karen blinked, confusion twisting her face. "Excuse me?" she snapped, crossing her arms. "I'm handling this." Captain Daniels shook his head. "Not anymore," he said. "I just got a call from management. The owner of this airline is on board." He paused, pointing to Aisha. "It's Miss Carter." The words hit like a thunderbolt. Gasps rippled through the cabin. The heiress's jaw dropped, her voice a hushed. "She owns it?" The tech mogul nodded, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Knew it," he muttered. Karen's face drained of color, her arms falling limp. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice cracking. "There's a mistake." Lila, clutching the passenger list, stepped forward, her voice trembling. "It's true, Karen. Her name's here. Aisha Carter, owner." Karen whirled on her, eyes wild. "Shut up, Lila," she hissed, but the fight was leaking out of her. Aisha rose, her emerald coat slipping over her shoulders like armor. She faced the cabin, her presence commanding, her voice steady. "I'm Aisha Carter," she said, her words ringing clear. "I own this plane, this airline, and I've watched you, Karen, disgrace it with your prejudice." The passengers leaned in, phones still recording, their eyes wide with awe. Mr. Henderson folded his arms, nodding approval. Mrs. Henderson set her purse aside, her expression soft but firm. Karen stumbled back, her mouth opening and closing. I didn't know," she choked out, her voice small. Aisha's gaze hardened. "You didn't care to know," she said, sharp and soulful. "You judged me, humiliated me, assaulted me, all because of what you assumed." She stepped closer, her tone unwavering. "Your job was to serve, not to gatekeep respect. You failed." The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Daniels announced, "we're making an unscheduled landing. Please remain seated." Murmurs erupted, confusion, curiosity. The heiress whispered, "What's happening?" The tech mogul glanced at Aisha, understanding dawning. Outside, the jet dipped, descending smoothly toward the tarmac. Moments later, it touched down. A sleek black SUV rolled up, its doors opening as two assistants in sharp suits stepped out. They boarded with brisk efficiency, their voices warm, respectful. "Miss Carter," one said. "Everything's ready." Karen's knees buckled, her face ashen. "Miss Carter," she croaked, barely audible. Aisha ignored her, turning to Captain Daniels. "I want this handled," she said. "No one else endures what I did today." He nodded. "Understood, Miss Carter." He faced Karen, his tone cold. "You're done here. Step aside." Karen shook her head, panic rising. "No, please," she began, but two police officers boarded, their boots heavy on the carpet. "Miss Carter," one said, "we got your report. Are you pressing charges?" Aisha's eyes locked on Karen. "Yes," she said firmly. "Assault, witnessed by all these people. Hold her accountable." Karen gasped, backing away. "This is a mistake," she cried, tears streaking her face. "I didn't mean—" The officer cut her off, pulling out handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest," he said, his voice calm, final. "Anything you say can be used against you." Karen's hands were cuffed, her sobs echoing as she pleaded, "Miss Carter, I'm sorry." Aisha's expression didn't soften. "You're sorry you got caught," she said, her voice ice. "Face the consequences." The officers led Karen away, her once sharp figure crumbling as she vanished down the aisle. Aisha turned to the passengers, her voice steady. "I apologize for what you saw," she said. "This isn't my standard. It changes now." The cabin erupted in applause. Tentative at first, then thunderous. Justice had landed, and Aisha stood tall, her quiet power undeniable. The jet sat quiet on the tarmac, its engines cooling as the black SUV whisked Aisha Carter away. Inside, the cabin buzzed with a new energy. Relief, admiration, a shift in the air. Passengers murmured, replaying the drama in hushed tones. The heiress smiled, her voice bright. "She's incredible," she said, her companion nodding. The tech mogul leaned back, satisfied. "That's how you lead," he muttered. Lila, the junior attendant, wiped her eyes, a faint smile breaking through. Captain Daniels addressed the crew, his tone firm. "This doesn't happen again. Understood?" Days later, Aisha's story exploded online. Videos of the confrontation, Karen's slap, Aisha's calm, the arrest, went viral, racking up millions of views. Comments flooded in, "She's a queen, respect matters." Aisha sat in a sleek studio, her emerald coat swapped for a tailored blazer, facing a captivated interviewer. "Miss Carter," he said, leaning forward, "your actions shook the world. What's your message?" She paused, her gaze steady. "Dignity isn't negotiable," she replied, her voice clear, soulful. "Everyone deserves it. No exceptions. That's the standard I'm setting." The interviewer nodded, moved. And for those without your power? Aisha's eyes softened. You don't need a title, she said. Stand firm in your worth. That's enough. Her words sparked a movement. Hashtags like Dignity First trended, inspiring stories of everyday courage. Back at her airline, Aisha rolled out new policies. Mandatory training, zero tolerance for bias. Luxury isn't just the jet, she said in a statement, her voice resonating online. It's how we treat each other. Weeks later, Aisha boarded another flight. The crew greeted her warmly. New faces, genuine smiles. Welcome aboard, Miss Carter, the lead attendant said, her tone respectful, her eyes bright. Aisha returned the smile, settling into her seat. The cabin hummed with a lighter vibe, champagne poured, laughter floated, respect woven into every gesture. She gazed out the window, the horizon stretching wide, a sea of clouds beneath a golden sky. Peace settled over her. This wasn't just about one flight, one fight. It was a ripple, a change she'd ignited. Aisha's reflection flickered in the glass, her calm strength unshaken. She'd turned humiliation into a lesson, prejudice into progress. The jet soared higher, carrying her vision forward. A future where dignity wasn't a battle, but a promise kept. She smiled softly, knowing the real victory wasn't hers alone. It belonged to everyone she'd inspired to rise.